live. Hey, it's Chris Barnes here on our Amplified Wellness podcast, coming to you all the way from Austin, Texas, at Paleo Effects. Today I have a really special guest, Anthony J, who's the author of Estrogeneration, a new book on how estrogenics are making people fat, sick, and infertile. Welcome, Anthony. How you doing, mate?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being on the podcast. I literally got this book in my hands yesterday when I got here. I'm 50 pages in, man. It's good.
Yeah,
it's an easy read. You said it was an easy read, and
it's expensive.
It really is.
It's expensive to ship to Australia.
Expensive to ship? Maybe I can buy a few and bring back a few.
I've gifted a few people in Australia the book.
Have you?
It's like $40 to ship, just to ship.
We get stung with shipping.
But at least I have an ebook. I have an ebook.
Exactly. You've got a contact over there. We can maybe work out some shipping to get it across there. This book's very interesting so far. Estrogeneration, Estrogenics. Let's start by telling our listeners a little bit about what estrogenics are, because for me, I'm familiar with estrogen, but I wasn't really familiar with the term estrogenics.
Right.
Where did this concept come from?
Yeah, estrogenics are basically artificial estrogen chemicals, so chemicals that act like estrogen in your body. Right? So that includes some of these plastic chemicals. It includes, birth control obviously is an artificial estrogen. It's designed to be an artificial estrogen, stay in your body a long time, act like estrogen. So those are a couple examples. The big ones, parabens, phthalates, BPA. There's even one that mold secretes. So a lot of people have heard of mold toxins. But there's a mold toxin that acts like estrogen in your body. So these things disrupt your natural hormones. They can cause infertility. They can cause weight gains. They store inside your fat cells. They can cause depression. For example, birth control users have higher suicide rates, just as one random example. People that, are exposed to more atrazine, which is a herbicide, second most used herbicide in North America.
In Australia as well, it's widely used.
And in Europe, fortunately, atrazine is illegal.
Yeah, it's banned, isn't it? Yeah.
So in America, we have 3,000 nanograms per liter allowed in the drinking water for atrazine.
Wow.
And in Europe, they have 0 allowed. And the problem is, in men, right, our natural estrogen is about 20 nanograms per liter. 20. So just contrast that with 3,000 nanograms per liter, which people are drinking.
That's here. Just with atrazine.
Just atrazine, and that's assuming you're not getting birth control in the water, which you are, or these other chemicals, right, which we're not filtering out of our water supply. So just from the water, the drinking water, you got to filter your water. I mean, just get that out of the way, right? That's the fundamentals. But there's a lot of other sources, like I say, personal care products, just a lot of these estrogens that are bombarding us every day. So that's what I wrote the book on. But then the culmination of the book is epigenetics. It's kind of this inheritance of these health problems. It's not just altering our health, it's altering the future generations. And that's the big problem, Estrogeneration. A lot of people mispronounce the book title because they say estrogenetics or something about genetics, but which is also fine, right? It's valid because it's messing up your genetics. Because a lot of people don't understand this concept epigenetics yet, because it's kind of a new concept.
It's relatively new, and maybe just touch on that for our listeners that don't know what the term actually means. So
epigenetics. Well, it's marks on your DNA. So the best analogy, and the analogy I use in my book, the best analogy I've heard is musical notes. So like musical notes would just be, you can pass that to somebody else, like Mary Had a Little Lamb. I don't know what the songs are in Australia. But like just really simple, simple notes. You give that to somebody else, they can play that on the piano. Right? That's like your DNA. You pass that on, doesn't really change, maybe a tiny change here or there, but epigenetics would be chords, right? Like marks on top of that DNA structure. So the song is still Mary Had a Little Lamb, it's still the same song, but now you've got like more complexity, more beauty. And the unique thing, of course, you can pass that on, give somebody the chords and they can play that, but you can modify those chords without changing the DNA. See?
Well, those chords can be modified through lifestyle, stress,
hormones,
estrogens, estrogenics.
Exactly. Wow. And in good ways and bad ways. So, it's not always a bad thing to have changes in epigenetics. Your body is constantly responding to the environment, changing epigenetics. The problem with these hormones that are specifically, altering your natural, these estrogenics, right? These artificial estrogens, is natural estrogen, when it binds the estrogen receptor, it goes into the nucleus. So that's a unique thing. Not everything does that. A lot of things, they go inside the cytosol of the cell. So there's actually a membrane on the cell, right? Plasma membrane, everybody knows. But there's another membrane around the DNA. It's called the nuclear membrane. not a lot of things go into the nucleus. They don't go into the nuclear membrane, right? So they get inside the cell, but that doesn't mean they're getting into the nucleus and messing with the DNA. These estrogen does, testosterone does as well. Binds the estrogen receptor, goes into the nucleus, and now you can see where the problem sets up, right? Because now we're changing these marks on top of the DNA. I mean, we're physically right there. And sure enough, you see that in the scientific research.
That's incredible. And one thing that really grabbed me, I was up late last night reading this book. There's estrogen receptors literally in every cell in your body. I was going through and just like reading the organs that are affected. It's literally every organ in your body. So these estrogenics are affecting every single organ in your body. You can see how insidious they can be if they get out of control.
Yeah, and a lot of researchers, I'm a researcher by trade, and a lot of researchers are just interested in toxicity. They're just measuring, well, what's the toxic dose of BPA? And then the FDA or whatever regulatory board says, okay, that's the toxic dose, we can have half of that or something is legally allowed. The problem with that is they're not factoring in these other similar chemical structures, right? Like if you've got a BPA at a high dose, then you've got phthalates at a high dose, maybe both of those are within some toxicity, range that's not toxic. But when you add them together, suddenly they are toxic, or even worse, they're altering your DNA, which has a lot longer term impacts. So you might not even see short term impacts, but 10 years from now, you've got problems.
And you touched on drinking water. Like I knew that things like fluoridated water and the chlorines and things in water, but you mentioned the birth control pill. In this book in particular, where you went to university, they spoke about not drinking that.
In Florida.
Yeah,
they do a lot of recycling of the water.
Would this be across the board? Like
it's pretty much, you find the birth control in the populated cities. So out in the country, at least in America, you've got the atrazine. But you don't have too much birth control. But when you come into a city like Austin, Texas here, or whatever, you start testing the water, it's full of birth control, real high levels.
So, like obviously from fertility perspective,
it's a killer.
It's killer, and men, like men taking,
we're basically taking birth control.
How does that affect us, like physiologically?
It varies a lot, but it lowers your testosterone. I mean, that's a big one. It's common. It's a common problem. It can cause higher SHBG as well. So SHBG is sex hormone binding globulin. So testosterone floats on water. Right. So your blood is like water. So if you put testosterone in your blood, it would just float. You can't get it around your body. So you have this. In my book I call it the limo. So it's basically the limo for sex hormones. It drives them around. It gets them around your body. Right. SHBG. And if you have too much limo, then all the testosterone is stuck inside the limo and it doesn't get out, and it actually doesn't act in your body. So one of the problems is, even if your testosterone is high enough, if you've got too much SHBG, it can't even be utilized, you see? So the other problem, there's actually three problems. Number one, it lowers your total testosterone. That's a problem. Number two, it increases the limo, SHBG. Number three, it actually can block binding to the receptors.
Oh wow,
so it's like putting a goal, like in soccer or something, it's like, or football, you call it football?
It's there, but it can't connect.
It's like putting a big board in front of the goal and you can't score. So it doesn't matter how many players you got out there. It doesn't matter how many balls you got out there. If you can't put the ball in the net, you're not making points.
It's just torture. So for men with low testosterone, you're thinking low muscle mass, things like depression, low sex drive,
cardiovascular issues.
That's
for
huge.
Sure. And then motivation, male motivation decreases. They've done a lot of animal studies, especially with atrazine. Like if, for example, you go on Google and you search atrazine male feminization, because it feminizes males, right? Like if you put frogs, you get breast development, you get a lot of different changes. Anogenital distance, if you want to get real technical, it gets changed. There's a lot of things.
Elaborate on that one, or just leave that one?
Well, let's just leave that one. You can Google that one later. But I mean, the basic idea is men become more feminized in different physiological ways, right? Including motivation. Our motivation decreases. That's not to say, but you can look at it with animals a lot easier, and frogs are a good example. If you put 200 nanograms per liter of atrazine in the water, and again 3,000 is the legal allowable drinking limit in America. You put 200 in the water, and you put a frog in there. You just raise a frog. The male frog will become a female frog. Yeah, so
that's incredible. That's scary.
And if you inject these things in animals, or if you put it in their drinking water, you see decreases in motivation to run mazes. I mean, you can see a lot of brain changes because again, we've got receptors in the brain, right? They're all over our body, so you're going to see problems pretty much wherever you look, but some of the problems are more obvious than others.
Yeah. And you think like the compounding effect of this over 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's probably not until people are starting to reach their 40s and 50s that they start to develop all these conditions and probably don't even look at this as the issue. It's just like
at that point, they're taking drugs
and
they think, you can change it to some degree with your diet. One of the best strategies to remove artificial estrogen, because again, it stores in your fat, which is the problem, right? So if it was just in your blood and then you cleared it, you'd have these temporary exposures, probably every day, because people are drinking out of plastics every day.
Yes.
People are not filtering their water. People are rubbing these fragrances on their body. There's good fragrances, but a lot of them have these chemicals, these parabens, these phthalates.
Yeah.
So they're putting them on their body every day. But their body's not just clearing that out, right? They're storing in the fat. One of the best ways to get it out is sauna. Hot sauna, like 180 degree Fahrenheit. I don't know what that means in Celsius. Another one for Google.
70 degrees, 60 or 70 is normally what we go in our saunas. It's pretty hot,
And you get in there, and sauna speeds up molecular motion.
Okay.
So the molecules are moving faster, and that clears a lot of them from the fat cells. In fact, they've done studies where they do skin patch testing.
Okay.
And they'll put, it's basically like a nicotine patch without the nicotine. They put that on people's skin. And if you send them into a sauna, and you test people that are in saunas and not in saunas, people in saunas, they're sweating out all these chemicals. You can test the patch, you take the patch off, and you test the chemicals. The sweat, you've got loads of BPA on that. You've got the phthalates. So again, that's probably the best strategy.
And I think,
as far as I've come across, and I think that's one of the reasons you get increased longevity with saunas, and you get so many benefits across such a spectrum. One of the big reasons. There's a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is you're decreasing these chemicals.
And infrared saunas, are they just as effective? Yeah.
But I think heat is really important. I like infrared because it gets into your body deeper, but I also I want to see the heat. I think infrared is unique because it has a lot of other benefits.
Yeah, a lot of mitochondrial health.
It releases nitric oxide from cytochrome C oxidase. It increases collagen production. There's a lot of interesting benefits. So you can kill two birds with one stone if you have a hot infrared sauna.
Yeah.
But either way, I think
it's fantastic. And one of the things you mentioned here about obviously the fat and the storage of these estrogenics, up to 10 years or even longer, stored within the fat cells.
Yeah, they've done studies on fat cells, and they talk about, they've actually looked at people that were exposed to the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
And so they have these radioactive molecules that are still present. So you can do these half-life studies, and they've shown that the average fat cell, the life of an average fat cell is 1.5 years, just the average cell.
Yeah.
But they found cells that are up to 10 years old from fat cells, right? So in other words, you can store these chemicals at least that long.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not even factoring in the epigenetic changes, these marks on the DNA that you can pass to the next generation. And the studies with that are really interesting because, sorry about the mic there.
Oh, that's okay. I thought it was mine dropping off. That's all good.
Getting too excited.
Too excited.
The studies with the epigenetics, you can imagine that if you're pregnant and you're exposed to these chemicals, you're exposing the fetus, right? So that's going to cause an impact, and you can just blame that on the exposure, the direct exposure. In fact, because the fetus develops gonads, whether it's egg and sperm, right? Those will also, those stem cells will be affected. So you can imagine that 3 generations just from one exposure can be affected, but the 4th generation, they're also affected. And that's the crazy thing.
That's incredible.
Right? That's the proof that it's epigenetic. Marks on the DNA are affected. It's not just the direct exposure. And they've done that in animal studies. There's a guy named Michael Skinner out in Washington. And he at any given time, he grows 3,000 to 5,000 mice in his lab. And he does generational studies. And like I said, he's proven with these estrogen chemicals up to 4 generations. That's as far as he goes because it's so expensive to grow this many mice. But that's the gold standard proof, right? To go out to that 4th generation to prove it's not just a direct exposure; it's actually an inheritable exposure. They call it transgenerational inheritance.
In the book, it's incredible.
So that's a big problem. And it's like scratching a CD. Some of these scratches, I don't know if you remember CDs. I know you would.
I love CDs.
But you scratch those CDs, it's hard to unscratch them.
Those wipes don't work.
So there's only so much you can do if you really badly scratch your CD. So the best way to avoid it, avoidance is always the best.
optimization.
Yep.
You mentioned in here there's a few different protocols people can follow as well. You can go pretty much full cold turkey and try and eliminate all estrogenics, or you start to reduce and minimize exposure.
I try to make it practical and easy for people to follow. Basically, I made a gold, a silver, and a bronze plan. Bronze would be somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, they're a college student, whatever. Let's get rid of these big exposures, the big ones like filtering your water, things like that, like the really big exposures, get those out, but some of the more fine-tuned ones, maybe if you're a pro athlete, you want to get really obsessive about this because your testosterone, 1% performance enhancement is going to be really important, right? So different plans for different strategies, but again, it's all about avoiding.
You mentioned filtering the water in the book. You mentioned boiling the water. Just doesn't cut it. It kills the bacteria and viruses and things, but these are molecules and they remain there. So reverse osmosis.
Reverse osmosis is great. For sure. That's what I actually use. I have a special stainless steel one.
Okay.
It's great. It's $500. It's called Guru. It's Pure Guru. P-U-R Guru. I don't make any money from it. I don't make any money from any of these supplement companies or anything, so I'm unbiased intentionally.
Full disclosure.
But the Pure Guru, it's a stainless steel unit, and I like it because it has a pump. And so it actually, rather than making reverse osmosis and then having a big plastic tank, right? You're actually just pumping water through this stainless steel unit. Now it's better to have a reverse osmosis and store it a little bit in the plastic tank and get it out, rather than just having it like straight. Obviously, filtering it is better than nothing. But this unit is really impressive because it's got activated charcoal, which is directly removing artificial estrogens. Activated charcoal, also called carbon sometimes on these filters. That binds Estrogenics, artificial estrogens. I've used it in research labs and I've published scientific papers using it. Peer-reviewed journals. This reverse osmosis machine, it's got activated charcoal and it's got the reverse osmosis unit. And then it's got a remineralizer, so it actually adds minerals back in. I mean, it's really...
Which is important, isn't it? Like after
it helps,
everything's removed.
Especially if you've got kids and they're not supplementing calcium, magnesium especially, You
touched on children. You're a father of 4.
And
father soon to be 3. How mindful are you now of estrogenics in your children?
For sure. I pay attention. I mean, anytime I have a choice between plastic or wood or plastic or stainless steel, I always go with non-plastic, even if it says BPA free. I mean, there's a big problem where they can say BPA free, which means bisphenol A, right? BPA, but then they can use bisphenol S, which is just slightly manipulating the molecule. It's like testosterone, right? Like when these bodybuilders use testosterone, they slightly manipulate the molecule so your liver doesn't break it down or something, and then or to fool the drug test. They do that with BPA to fool the regulatory committees and things, but it still acts like estrogen. BPS, BPAF, BPF. There's a whole laundry list of them. You can just keep making them up.
So no plastics are safe, really.
It's really. I mean, it's up to the honesty of the people making the plastics, and it's even just a financial battle, right? Like if you start making plastic that's legitimately estrogen free, it's going to cost a little bit more, even a couple cents more per bottle, and then people are just not going to buy it. You're going to go out of business. See, so it's kind of a vicious cycle. So, but stainless steel, you can't go wrong. Glass, you can't go wrong. So that's always a good thing. Even like room temp, just sitting water in room temp bottle. I mean, you can get 1,000 nanograms per liter of phthalates in there.
Wow.
So again, going back to how much estrogen we have, right? Like men are around 20, women are up to about 400.
1,000 just for one bottle of water sitting there, room temperature.
Right, and so people think, women must be, in the thousands of estrogen. They're really not. I mean, 20, they range between 20 and 400, depending on the time of the month. Women also sometimes are at about 20. So you throw in a few thousand nanograms of estrogen chemicals, and these are tiny amounts, right? Like we didn't even used to measure nanograms in research labs until the technology was there. So it's not trivial, but that tiny amount has this long-term impact.
One thing that really caught my attention in this book was the estrogenic factor of lavender.
Lavender essential oil.
As a father, lavender essential oils is a go-to in the diffuser and rubbing on our children's feet to help.
It's anti-inflammatory.
It's anti-inflammatory, but does that pose a risk?
It's estrogen. It also acts like estrogen. So they had a study in the New England Journal of Medicine showing these children that were developing breast tissue. Boys, they were getting gynecomastia. That's the technical term. And they removed all the lavender from their personal care products, and the gynecomastia just went away. And so then they followed that up in this same study by looking at the estrogen receptor and seeing, does this activate the estrogen receptor? Does it act like estrogen, right? And sure enough, it does, and that's kind of like the gold standard study, in my opinion.
Does it activate the receptor?
Exactly. And you know, sometimes people do these rat studies where they look at the thickness of the rat uterus and stuff, but it's like, you know, it depends what the rats are eating. And there's a lot of other factors there, because like most people in research labs are actually feeding rats all these oils, like corn oil and soybean oil and all that. And guess what? You know, they're stored in plastics. They're giving the rats all these estrogen chemicals, right? And then if you throw in another estrogen chemical and there's not that much difference. What a surprise, you know what I mean? But with these studies looking directly at the estrogen receptor, you know, lavender essential oil definitely activates. So does tea tree oil, it seems. And there was just another study this year that came out further validating that. There's been like 3 or 4 studies. So I get nervous about that one essential oil. I like the anti-inflammatory aspect, and some postmenopause women need more estrogen. So in certain ways, it benefits. You know, in certain contexts, it can be beneficial. But I'm cautious with that one. I'm also cautious with cannabis smoke. You know, smoking marijuana. The gummies, the edibles, all that stuff, you don't have any estrogen response,
so
but the smoke you do.
And
oftentimes, especially with teenagers, you see a problem with fertility later in their life, or other estrogen symptoms like apathy, you know, things like that, like we talked about before, especially in males. You don't see that as much in the females, but it's something to consider, and especially for younger people, you know, under 20 years old, it's a real issue.
That's a really good point. And touching back on fat, for men and women struggling with weight management, how much does Estrogenics affect fat storage? Because it mentions in the book really about the impact of that.
I mean, it triggers fat storage, right? And so it's through a protein called PPAR gamma, PPAR, and then the Greek letter gamma is like a G. And so it's kind of like flipping on a fat switch. You've got these estrogen chemicals. Again, they go into your fat cells. They're happy there. That's where they want to be. And the problem is they're flipping on this fat switch. They're telling the fat cells to store more fat. And you know, so if that chemical is sitting in the fat cell, constantly communicating, store more fat, store more fat, store more fat, right? And if you're not getting that chemical out of there, that's an uphill battle to lose weight. And a lot of people hit these plateaus, you know, when they're trying to lose weight. And a lot of it has to do, in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with these chemicals that are in the fat cells. Get those out with the sauna, right? Or these, you know, like a few day fast or some kind of
fast
intermittent fasting
can really help with that.
Anything to get into ketosis helps. You know?
Ketogenic diets are following that.
And then that way, once you get that stuff out of there, it certainly, you know, helps the cause, right? Because you get that switch out of the system.
So this fat storage could actually occur regardless of calorie intake as well.
Exactly,
People
it
do
does.
a very low calorie diet, but have too many estrogenics in their fat cells.
They've done those studies in animals. I mean, that's my problem with this idea of just counting calories is where it's at for everything, right? I mean, that's one of the problems. For example, if you there's a study about mitochondria dysfunction in mice or rats with atrazine, and they gave them the exact same diet, exact same everything, except one group of the rats. And these are groups, not just one individual rat. It's like, you know, dozens of rats, and they gave one of the groups low dose atrazine, and I emphasize low dose because it's not like they're just blasting them with this stuff. Just a little bit of atrazine in the water. The other group, nothing in the water, just pure water. Everything else the same, calories the same. This group got fat. The atrazine group got fat. So, you know, you could be counting calories and putting this stuff on your skin through your personal care products, which a lot of them have. Right? The cheap, just generic ones are fine. And you can be struggling with this uphill battle if you're counting your calories, you're not losing the weight. You know? So it certainly helps to get them out of the system so that, I mean, eventually you're going to lose weight if you just stop eating, but you don't have to go that far. Right? You don't have to starve yourself. It's better to use some of these, you know, simpler strategies, which you probably want to do anyway.
You mentioned obviously sauna, any version of fasting, whether intermittent or longer fasts.
I think all of it works. It depends on the person, and how much they've been exposed. I mean, how much much they can handle.
That's the thing,
it's
like,
a unique situation.
Yeah, we've heard a lot, like yesterday, on the impact of obviously these toxins in the body and people trying to release them too fast and not having the clearance pathways to actually handle all those releases, like estrogenic compounds or other
heavy
toxins.
metals especially.
So they need to be mindful that they're actually cleansing properly with those detox pathways if they are trying to get rid of these.
I think it's more important with heavy metals and things. Like if you suddenly release a lot of heavy metals into your body, you're going to get weird heart palpitations, you're going to have some weird issues. But with these ones, I don't think it's as big of an issue. You can blast them out pretty fast.
Kick them out, so just go hard.
Faster the better.
Fasting in the sauna, drinking lots of water.
Yeah, exactly. Drinking lots of electrolyte, water.
That's fantastic. We've only just touched on some of the estrogenic compounds. There's a lot more. Is there 10?
I put it into a top 10 list.
Top 10 list in there.
There's more, but I kind of lumped certain categories together, like the sunscreen, chemicals, and then, by the way, they're making a lot of these illegal now, partially because of the book, right?
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Like Hawaii and in the United States, Hawaii just banned sunscreen, they say in the headlines. But in reality, they didn't really ban sunscreen. They just banned the chemicals that I talk about in my book. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think there's 10 other countries that have pledged to do the same thing. So by 2020, in the next year or two, depending on the country, they're working to ban at least those chemicals, because not only is it harming humans, right? It's harming the wildlife, it's harming the coral reefs, it's killing off all these fish. They found, for example, parabens in polar bears. If you go up to northern Alaska,
everything's being affected.
You think you're in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, and they've tested 11 polar bears. They tested their fat, and they found parabens in every single one.
It's horrendous.
Because it's up the food chain, right? It's getting in the seawater, it's polluting our whole entire, it's circulating the ocean just like it circulates your blood. Moving up the food chain, polar bears are
so things like seafood, consuming too many big.
And then you get the infertility, right? So then people are blaming, like the dad who's taking his kid out to go fishing, catching a couple fish, and they're saying that's killing off the fish populations, right? It's like they're hyper-regulating those situations. And of course they're overdoing it on the netting and all that, but I mean, we're killing off these, the fertility issue is huge in terms of sustainability in these populations. I mean, polar bears are a great example, right? Like, people talk about global warming and all that, but there's also this factor of parabens, right? I mean, we see it. You can look at the studies. You can see that's, a contributing factor to infertility. So it's a global problem, and I'm hoping to see more countries follow Europe in terms of the legal status, because most of these are illegal in Europe. That's what's really interesting. And of course, Europe is much healthier than America on pretty much all of these metrics.
We should follow suit there.
Yeah,
definitely. Anthony, commend you on this book. This is fantastic, and just bringing more awareness to. I guess the impacts of estrogenics.
Thanks.
Definitely recommend everybody out there listening and watching, go get yourself a copy. Is this available on Amazon for people in Australia and other countries?
Oh yeah.
Estrogeneration. It's been amazing having you on our podcast, Amplified Wellness. Thanks so much for being on.
Good to talk to you, Chris.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Cheers. If you love this podcast, make sure you subscribe to Amplified Wellness Podcast. Cheers.